Hello everyone. This is your friend, your mentor, your coach for CA Final Paper number 3, Advanced Auditing and Professional Ethics. So hi, I'm Rohit Grover. So here I welcome you all to the lecture number 2 of our very important topic. And we all know that what topic we are talking about. Yes, we are talking about the professional ethics, right everyone? So, in the previous lecture, that is in the lecture number 1, I gave you the lot of introduction about this topic called professional ethics, which is also known as Code of Ethics and which is also known as CA Act 1949. So, at that point of time, I already told you that new Code of Ethics and the new Professional Ethics Code 2019 has also come into the incorporation. But as per the ICA guidelines, the new Code of Ethics is not at all applicable for the November 2020 examination. But we have to wait for the declaration if whether Code of Ethics 2019 is going to be applicable for May 2021 or not, right? Now, in this particular professional ethics, I think we have already started with the CA Act 1949 and we have already covered so many aspects of the CA Act. If I'm not wrong, we have done the section number 2, section number 3, section number 4, section number 7, section number 8 and section number 20 with the other residual provisions, right? So we'll do the quick revision of that and after that we'll proceed with the today's topics, right? So today in this lecture, we are going to cover very important topics today. Are you getting the point? Some of the topics on which so many times the question has been asked. Right? So if you have not known about this particular lecture, if this lecture in the beginning of the lecture, if you think that it is looking alien to you again or you are not comfortable with the lecture, so I will suggest you that you should first see the lecture number 1 and after that only you should continue with the lecture number 2. Directly if you are going to continue with the lecture number 2 on the professional ethics, you will not be able to get even a single word because everything will be like over the top for you. It will be a bouncer for you. Everyone clear? So let us understand what is a lecture number 2 relating to the professional ethics. So let us do the quick revision. If you all remember, we have talked about the section number 2, subsection 1, clause B, the definition of the chartered accountant. Who is a chartered accountant? The chartered accountant means a person who is a member of institute and who is entitled to enter his name in the register of member as per section number 4. Then we did with who is member deemed to be in practice, section number 2, subsection 2. In that we understood that the one who is in practice of accountancy, the one who is in practice of auditing, who is in practicing of certification of financial statements, books and records, and who is also in the practice of verification of the financial accounting, the one who is in providing the additional or advisory or render the professional services and also into the practice of certification of facts of the project reports and all, and one who is also going to be called as a member deemed to be in practice as suggested by the ICA. But there is a very important explanation given by the ICA that if you are a fellow chartered accountant or if you are an associate chartered accountant registered with the ICA and you're working as a salaried employee, you're working as a salaried employee in under one chartered accountancy firm or a firm of chartered accountants, then for the limited purpose for which you are training their article assistant, you will be treated also as a members deemed to be in practice. And after that, section number 2 subsection 2 has been further extended by giving the management consultancy and other services. Are you getting a definition of management consultancy and other services? The section is section 2 subsection 2 clause D. Are you getting the point? So in that we understood that what kind of management consultancy and other services a chartered accountant in practice can also provide. And remember one thing, ICA in its meeting, the council, I already told you that in this chapter we will try to use the most of the word called council. The council has recently introduced these services. Now chartered accountant in practice can very well provide these services, right? Section number 2 subsection 2 clause D. Now under that services, I told you there are 3 list of services we have to understand. Those which are not in the part of management consultancy and other services, those which are allowed to be provided and those which are prohibited. First let us complete the prohibited. You all know that you are not allowed to be in the underwriter. You are not allowed to be the underwriter of any company. You cannot provide the underwriting services, you cannot provide the portfolio management services, and you cannot provide the broking services. So where it is written? It is written here, for the removal of the doubts, it is hereby clarified that activities of the broking, activities of the underwriting and activities of the portfolio management are allowed or prohibited. So they are prohibited. Then there is a exclusion list also in the section 2 subsection D. Now you will find that section 2 subsection 2 clause D, you will find that you are not allowed to be involved in statutory audit or periodical audit or any kind of tax representation, either it is direct tax or indirect tax or any tax related concerns and issues, not as a executor, not as a trustee, not as a liquidator, not as an administrator, and not as a receiver. You are not allowed to provide these. So this is the exclusion list of section 2, subsection 2, clause D. And then so many including services are there. Sir, list is very huge, but I already told you how to remember that. First one, financial management services. All the chapters of financial management subject which you have done at your intermediate level, if you can note down all the chapters name, that will be becoming a financial management services. You are also allowed to provide the management accounting services like price fixation, market research, demand and supplies, or various management accounting related decision making. You are also allowed to provide the HR management services, where you are going to help in employees recruitment, employees hiring policy, the job evaluation, and what should be the incentive plans and all. And you are also allowed to provide the management and operational audit. You can also provide some value added services like valuation of shares or valuation of business, amalgamation, merger kind of acquisitions kind of services. You are also allowed to help allowed to give the services in relation to policy making, business policies, basically strategic management subject. All the chapters of the strategic management subject, if you are ready, you can write that particular thing which you have already done at intermediate level. And you are also allowed to provide the services in relation to training, how to make the inefficient employee into efficient employee, deciding the training of the employees, turning them from skilled to unskilled labor, conduct of training programs, workshops, seminars for them. And you are also allowed to provide the services relating to information technology. You can provide the computer and computer related services. And most importantly, you are also allowed to provide the services in relation to what advisory consultant. Basically, in the advisory consultancy, we all understood the provisions of the services relating in connection with the prospectus. You can help the company in drafting the prospectus, you can help the company in selecting the print media, you can help the company in selecting the underwriters, but you are not allowed to be the underwriters. You can help the company in selecting the underwriters, which underwriter we should select. Under recommendation is allowed, but you can't work as an underwriter. That is prohibited list. Am I correct? You can work as a insurance brokerage services under the IRDA Act 1999. But other than that, you are not allowed to take up any broking services. Also, you are not allowed to be in the portfolio management. But yes, you can help them in drafting a prospectus. You can help them in submitting a prospectus. You can help them in selecting the underwriters. You can help them in selecting the marketing strategy, print media, what should be the content of prospectus, how to draft, how to write each and everything. You can help that we have understood in advisory consultant. You can also help them in investment counseling. You can help them in counseling relating to the SEBI Act, SCR Act, but you are not allowed to be involved in portfolio management. Remember one thing, underwriting point is very important, broking point is very important, and portfolio management point is also very important. Don't get confused between these 2 points. Try to analyze the question very carefully. Accordingly, your answer should be there. Am I correct? And you are also allowed to help the company in doing the issue management. What do you mean by issue management? Post issue services like registrar, like issuing the share certificate, transfer, transmission. You can help that company in these management consultancy and other services. You can also help the company in doing the quality audit, environmental audit. You can provide energy audit, that anyways we are going to understand at the later stage. You can also yeah, you cannot work as a recovery agent for banking sector, but you can act as a recovery consultant. Recovery agent is not allowed, recovery consultant is allowed. And IRDA already told you. Now section number 4 told that when your name is required to be entered into the register of members, when you have cleared your CA final examination plus GMCS training plus 3 years of articleship, then you can enter your name. And first you will be entered as an ACA, Associate Chartered Accountant. After that you will be treated as a fellow chartered accountant, right? This one we have already covered. Then section number 6 talks about the certificate of practice. So as a member in practice, if you want to practice in India as an auditor, or if you want to perform the auditing function, you have to procure a certificate of practice. So in the coming lecture, yes, I promised you in this lecture, but in the next lecture I will try my level best to show you the membership certificate and the certificate of practice. I already told you how to see the membership number in the previous lecture. If you remember, I shown you my what do you say, fellow chartered accountancy status, fellow chartered accountant status from the ICA website, how to trace a member by putting my membership number. Now, after that, we also understood section number 7. What is section number 7? Ki every institute, basically what the institute is trying to tell that ki if you are a multi-qualified person, suppose you are CA, CS and CMA, and you are a practicing chartered accountant, then you are allowed to use that designation called chartered accountant below your name, but you are not allowed to use the word called company secretary or cost and management accountant below your name, because you are practicing in CA, and multiple practice is not allowed simultaneously, right? But yes, in case of lawyer, in case you are advocate, or in case you are a chartered accountant, these are the only two professions which can be practiced together. Other than that, no two professions can be practiced together in India. But at the end of the day, council has also clarified that ki yes, you are allowed to use the word called MBA, CS, CMA after your name. You are not allowed to use the word called company secretary. If you remember, you are allowed to use the word called CS, CMA after your name. Are you getting the point or not? That also we understood here. And then we understood section number 8, that is called disabilities of a member. If you have not completed the age of 21 years, if you are a one sound mind, if you are an undischarged insolvent, if you are a discharged insolvent but you have not obtained the certificate from the court saying that that insolvency was not due to the misconduct, it was due to misfortune. If you have convicted for any offense called moral turpitude, you were imprisoned or transposition, or you were punishable with an offense until and unless you have obtained the discharge certificate from the central government relating to that, and any other, if you have been removed from the membership number due to any kind of misconduct or professional misconduct. Next point, membership of India. We already know that when you will get the membership of ICAI, when you clear your CA final exams, GMCS and articleship, that we have understood over here. And removal of name from the register. Under what circumstances your name will be removed from the register? If the member is dead, if the member voluntarily has given the instructions to the council to remove his name from the register, or if you have not paid your prescribed fees on time. Do you all remember that? If you have not paid your prescribed fees on time, and all the disabilities of section number 8 are also included here, except first, not completed the age of 21 years is not the criteria over here. Remaining 5 points of disabilities are included here. And most importantly, if you have later on paid your fees, first you have not paid, they will remove, but later on if you have paid your fees, your name will be reinserted back in the register of members. So that is what we have understood. Now let us start now today with a very important topic called chartered accountants in practice. Are you getting the point? So in the today's lecture, we are going to understand a very important element, some practical questions on the basis of which, yes, examination does ask you those questions. Clear everyone? So we will try our level best to understand what kind of practical questions the examiner may ask you from these particular questions, right? Now see, what is the first thing we have to understand? The first thing what we have to understand here is that what is the topic name? First of all, the topic name is known as chartered accountant in practice. The name of the topic is known as chartered accountant in practice. So let us start with the today's lecture. Now, cancellation and restoration of certificate of practice. It means first your certificate of practice was cancelled and then restored. There are so many reasons for that. Say for example, you were convicted for an offense and later on it is proved that you were innocent in that, then again restoration will take place. Once it is cancelled and again it is restored. There might be a case that you have not paid your fees on time, but after that you have paid your fees on time, again it might be restored again. So cancellation of your certificate of practice, remember one thing, I'm not talking about the membership number, I'm talking about the certificate of practice. So certificate of practice and membership certificate, both are different things. So if your membership certificate has been cancelled, or if your certificate of practice has been cancelled, then in that case whether it can be restored or not, that we are going to understand. So we are talking about certificate of practice cancellation and restoration. Now see what the ICAI is saying. ICAI says that Regulation 10 of the provides that certificate of practice shall be liable for the cancellation. Under what circumstances your certificate of practice is liable for the cancellation, that we are going to understand. If the name of the holder of the certificate is removed from the register. If your name is removed from the register, then in that case your name will be cancelled, your certificate of practice will be cancelled. So if you have fallen under section number 20 removal provisions, again speaking, if you have fallen under section number 20 removal provisions, sir, what do you mean by that? Dead? Are you getting in a point? Your name will be removed from the register of members, therefore your certificate of practice also will be cancelled. You voluntarily are surrendering your certificate of practice, that will be cancelled. You have not paid the fees, then also it will be cancelled. And out of 6 disabilities of section number 8, the last 5 disabilities, then also it will be cancelled. So indirectly we can say that if your name has been removed from section number 20 under such certification or under the such circumstance, also your certificate of practice can also be cancelled. Everyone clear? Then if the council is satisfied, if the council is satisfied that after giving an opportunity of being heard to the person concerned, the such certificate was issued on the basis of incorrect, misleading or false information, or by mistake or inadvertence. Now, under what other circumstances your cancellation of the COP may take place? Say, for example, at the time when you gave the information for your name to be registered in register of members, you have given the incorrect information or false information or misleading information or wrong information or fraudulent information. If the chartered accountant has given the wrong information, if the person has given the wrong information and by mistake ICA enters your name in the register of members and issues you the certificate of practice, later on ICA comes to know that the information provided by you was false, misleading, or it was incorrect, or it was fraudulent. And then in that case, once the ICA will realize its mistake, then ICA can cancel your certificate of practice. So in the point number 1 we understood if you have been removed by the ICA from the register of members, and point number 2 may what we understood in case you have given the wrong information and on the basis of wrong information ICA already included your name in the register of members and issued you the certificate of practice, but later on ICA came to know that yes, your information was false, wrong, then in that case ICA can cancel your certificate. Clear everyone? Yes. Then member ceases to practice. What do you mean by member ceases to practice? Member has stopped doing the practice. Now when the member has stopped doing the practice, there is no point of keeping the certificate of practice. You have to surrender your certificate of practice because you are telling to the council that I am no more a practicing CA. I want to surrender my certificate of practice. So when you are surrendering your certificate of practice, the ICA is going to cancel your certificate of practice. What is the fourth reason? A member has not paid the annual fees for the certificate of practice till 30th day of September of the relevant year. I already told you you have to make sure that on or before 30th September every year, every chartered accountant in India who is running his practice, who is a practicing chartered accountant, must pay the membership fees, must pay the COP fees also, certificate of practice fees also, on or before 30th September every year. And if you fail to pay that fees, then in that case your name will be cancelled and your certificate of practice also will be cancelled after giving the opportunity of being heard. So in total, sir, there are 4 circumstances under which your certificate of practice will be cancelled. Sorry, COP will be cancelled if COP will be cancelled. Sir, if, when, if. Point number 1, you were removed under section 20. You were removed under section 20, or you have not paid the annual fees, or you cease to practice. You cease to practice. And most importantly, yes, you have given the false information. Later on, council found it and cancelled COP. Everyone is clear? So these are the various circumstances under which your COP will be cancelled. I hope everyone is crystal clear. In the previous lecture also I told you that when you are reading or when you are learning the professional ethics with me, your 2 responsibility: one notebook in your hand and one pen in your hand. Make sure that whatever the class notes I am writing on the material itself only, they should be there in your present notes. And I already told you by the time professional ethics topic will be over, almost 5 to 6 lectures it will take, 6 to 7 lectures it will take. Along with that, what the day when you will get the last lecture of professional ethics, these particular notes also will be shared with you, so that whatever your comfortability level is, either you want to read it from the material, which I have given to you, or from this material on which I am writing, that is your choice. Are you getting the point? Now once your COP is cancelled, the holder shall surrender the same to the secretary. Are you getting the point? The moment you get the certificate of practice has been cancelled by the ICA, it is your responsibility that you have to hand over. You have to hand over the certificate to whom? You have to hand over the certificate to whom? ICA. I hope all of you are understanding. Yes, to the ICA, to whom, sir? To the secretary. You have to hand over the certificate to whom? To the secretary. Clear, everyone? So you have to hand over the certificate to the secretary. Surrender the certificate to the secretary. Now, regulation number 10 to said that ki under what circumstances your COP will be cancelled, but regulation number 11 says that ki under what circumstances it can be restored. And for restoration, let me tell you one thing, you have to first make a written application to the council. Are you getting the point? And you have to pay the required fees also. Once your written application and required fees approved by the council, then the council may, not shall, council may restore your COP. Are you understand? What do you mean by the difference between may and shall? May means what? Council, if council is satisfied, then only your certificate restoration will take place. If the council is not satisfied, not convinced by the reason what you are giving, then in that case it will not be restored. So the regulation number 11, let us see what the regulation number 11 is saying. Regulation number 11 says what? Regulation number 11 says that restoration of COP states that on an application made in the approved form and on the payment of such fees, the council may, what is the word used? It may restore the COP with the effect from the date on which it was cancelled. And not to worry, if your COP has been cancelled and after 1 month your COP is getting restored, but your COP will be restored from the date on which it was cancelled only. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So your COP will be restored from the date on which it was cancelled. The 1 month gap will not be called as a discontinuous gap. That is a very good thing. In case your COP cancel is getting restored, it will be restored from the date, from the moment on which it was cancelled, to a member whose certificate has been cancelled due to the non-payment of annual fees for the COP and whose application complete in all respect together with the fees is received by the secretary before the expiry of the relevant year. So regulation number 10 says what? Regulation number 10 says that your COP can be cancelled under 4 circumstances, and regulation number 11 says that in case you have paid up the required fees or required late payment or required application form is crystal clear, in that circumstances also your COP can be restored. Clear, everyone? Everyone? Yes. Now, next thing. Now, what is a glossary? What is a holder of restricted certificate means what? What do you mean by holder of restricted certificate? Now, see, holder of restricted certificate means a person holding a permanent or temporary restricted certificate granted by the state government under the Restricted States Rules 1932. Now, what used to happen earlier? Now, you all might be aware of the fact that before 1949, before CA Act 1949, then also chartered accountants used to practice. Are you getting the point? CA Act 1949, after that only the certificate of practice has been introduced, right? So before the commencement of this act, some chartered accountants used to practice. At that point of time, they used to get the certificate of practice from whom? The state government in which they are practicing. So that certificate is known as what? Holder of restricted certificate. Now, who is called registered accountant? Same, the person who has registered at that point of time with the central government. Register of the chart accountants maintained by the central government. Then in that case, so let us see, registered accountant means a person who has been enrolled on the register of accountant maintained by the central government and the auditor certificates rule 1932. So what do you mean by holder of restricted certificate? If you are holding a certificate which is granted by the state government. But what do you mean by a registered accountant? If your name was in the register of accountants maintained by central government under the auditor certificate rules 1932. Then what do you mean by year? Year, we all know, year means starting from the 1st April ending on 31st March. See, starting from the first day of April of any year and ending on the 31st day of March of the succeeding year, relevant for the branch limits which are computed on yearly basis. So with that, our some provisions relating to this act are over. So I already told you professional ethics is a very huge topic. It will minimum take 5 to 6 lectures, 6 to 7 also it may go. So make sure that each and every provision which we are reading in the material, I'm not thinking that I'm leaving any stone unturned. So you also make sure that when you are revising, you are preparing, you are also doing the same. Am I correct? Now it's better that you better revise this particular topic along with me only. Now the next topic what we have to understand in this particular topic called professional ethics today, a highly important topic. So let me just put how many star marks you want. You want star marks, as many star marks you want. And you won't believe, when I completed my CA final examination, at that point of time, the year in which I passed, the moment, the attempt in which I passed, that is my second attempt in which I passed my CA examination, at that point of time, same question came in my examination. Same question came in my examination. Now, what do you mean by maintenance of branch? Now, it's a very simple point, but I don't know why the students make it very complicated. There are simple rules and regulations given by the ICA. Simple rules and regulations given by whom? ICA. And you have to make sure that those simple rules and regulations, do have to make it simpler. Don't make it complicated for you. And I will suggest you, especially this topic, you must read it from ICAI material also. Especially this topic, you have to read it from ICAI material. There is one very important, very highly qualified example has been given, and I will also try my level best to make you see that example in the video itself only. But let me tell you first of all what this particular section called 27 on maintenance of branches all about. Now let us understand or utilize this place. Now say for example you are having one branch. Say for example you are having one office. So say for example you are having one office. Now in this office you are a head. You are a head of your office. You are a chartered accountant. Now what they are saying, that maintenance of branch office, what they are saying, that in the city in which you are having an office, suppose this is the city in which you are having the office. After city, what starts? Municipal limit starts. After city, what starts? Municipal limit starts. Like in Hyderabad, do we have the GHMC limits or not? Yes. So 10 to 15 kilometers of the boundary of the Hyderabad is nothing called municipal limits. So your second office should be, if your second office is within 50 kilometers from the municipal limits of the city in which your first office is located. Now listen to this provision very carefully. Suppose your first office is located in one city, say for example Hyderabad. Suppose this is Hyderabad. Now, if your second office is located within the 15 kilometers, within the what? 50 kilometers, within 50 kilometers, not from the end of the city, from the end of the municipal limits of the city. Now, suppose this is Hyderabad and this is the municipal. So, let me create this diagram again for you. So, let me suppose this is Hyderabad, when here your first office is located, and this is the municipal limits of your Hyderabad. Are you getting on? This is the municipal limits of the Hyderabad. Now from the municipal, this is Hyderabad city limits and this is the municipal limits. Now within 50 kilometers, if within 50 kilometers your second office is there, then in that case they are saying that if within 50 kilometers your second office is there, then in that case they said that the second office need not be headed by another CA, need not be headed by another chartered accountant. But if your second office is located after 50 kilometers from the municipal limit of the city in which your first office is located, how many kilometers after? After 50 kilometers. Suppose your second office is here now. Say for example another city called Warangal. This is another city. Are you getting the point? Now if your second office is in Warangal, now tell me, is Warangal more than 50 kilometers away from the Hyderabad city or not? And that too not from the city limits. Again, I'm saying 50 kilometers has to start from the municipal limits, not the city limits. After 50 kilometers from the municipal limits, if your second office is there, then it is must be headed by another chartered account. That is the provision under section number 27. So what is the section number 27 is saying? Section number 27 is saying that ki, sir, if your second CA office belonging to me only, suppose my first CA office is in Hyderabad. After the Hyderabad city, some municipal limits of the Hyderabad will start. From that municipal limits ending, if within 50 kilometers, if I have the second office, then in the second office, it is not required to be headed by another chartered accountant. But after 50 kilometers, if my second office is located, say for example, in the another city, which is more than 50 kilometers away from my first office, then in that case, chartered accountant must head your second office. So in that case, second office, your branch office must be headed by a chartered accountant. That is what the provision in section number 27. So let us read what is section number 27 is telling you. I told you now, very important chapter and very simple and very interesting also. So let us see what this particular topic is telling you. Where a chartered accountant in practice or a firm of chartered accountants has more than one office in India, each one of such office shall be in separate charge of a member of institute. The provision says that if you are having more than one office in India, then every office must be headed by a chartered accountant. But did I tell you one provision? When the second office need not be headed by a chartered accountant if it is located within 50 kilometers from the municipal limits of your first office. Are you getting the point or not? Provided that council may in suitable cases exempt any chartered accountant in practice or firm of chartered accountants from the operation of this subsection when every chartered accountant in practice or a firm of chartered accountants maintaining more than one office shall send to the council a list of offices and the person in charge thereof and shall keep the council informed of any changes in relation thereto. So far main provision has not come. We are reading word to word. So far everything is crystal clear. What does this section number 27 is saying that if you are having more than one office of chartered accountancy practice in India, it is your responsibility that each office is headed by a chartered accountant or a member of institute. Need not be a practicing chartered accountant, but he should be a member of institute. And in such cases, it is your responsibility to give the information of all of your offices, all of your branches to the ICA and keep on updating the ICA, the council, if necessary changes are coming. Now exemptions. Now what are the exemptions I gave you? Now exemption number 1, provision for the firm to have a second office. If your second office, now see, if the second office is located in the same premises, sir, your second, now suppose first floor your one office is there. Let's take an example. This is a 2-floor building. This is your first floor, and on the second floor also your second office is there. So first office is on the first floor and second office is in the second floor of the same building in the same premises, then it is not required to be headed by another member of institute. Are you getting the point? What is the second exemption? If your another office is in the same city, say for example, this is Hyderabad, this is my first office and this is my second office in the same city. Now it is in the which city? It is in the same city. Now also the second office is not required to be headed by a member of institute. And the third one, which I already told you, the second office is within the 50 kilometers radius from the municipal limits of the city. So say for example, this is Hyderabad city, this is municipal limits of Hyderabad, and your first office is here. Your first office is in Hyderabad, and within 45 kilometers only your second office is there. Now in that case, in this second officer need not be headed by another member of institute. Clear everyone? But if it is more than 50 kilometers away, suppose it is 80 kilometers away from the end of the municipal limits of Hyderabad, yes, then the second office must be headed by another member of institute. Are you getting the point? So what are the 3 exemptions under which you need not have a second chartered accountant heading your second office? Point number 1, if your second office is in the same building. Point number 2, if your second office is in the same city. Point number two, if your second office is located within the 50 kilometers from the end of the municipal limits of the city in which your first office is located. The moment it crosses more than 50 kilometers, then in that case, second office should also require to be headed by a member of institute. So let me take you to the ICAI. Let me take you to the ICAI Institute material so that we can understand it. I told you na, ICAI material is very awesome. You have to make sure that you are doing that. So let us see where the section number 23 is being talked about. 27, sorry. I think in the beginning only it has been talked about somewhere. Yeah, this is called maintenance of branch office, section number 27. Now see what they are saying. Now you can see this example, very important example. So this is what the exemption we are doing. Under what circumstances your second office is not required? Now see, under what circumstances your second office is not required to be under the separate charge of a member of institute? Point number A, if the second office is located in the same premises. And example number two, if your second office is located in the same city, if your second office is located in the same city. Are you getting the point? But look at this example, very important example. Now look at that. Your first office is within 15 kilometers from the city. Now say for example, this is a city. This is the city boundary. You can see the circle number 1. This is the city boundary. Now in the city boundary, you can say that in the city within 50 kilometers, your office is there. Now tell me one thing, this is a municipal limit. This is the which limit? You can see that circle number 1. Are you able to see the circle number 1? Yes, sir. Circle number 1 is known as municipal limits. It is which limit? Municipal limit. Now within the 35 kilometers of the municipal limit, your second office is there. Within the 35 kilometers of your municipal limit, your second office is there. Now tell me, are you going to calculate the 50 kilometers from inside the first office or from the municipal limits? From the municipal limits. So the second office is 35 kilometers. Am I correct? 35 kilometers is the difference of municipal limits plus along with that 10 kilometers inside it. Now 35 plus 10 comes to what? 35 plus 10 comes to what? 45 kilometers. It means it is within the 50 kilometers from the end of the circle 1 or not. So let me just create one example for you so that you can have a better clarity. Let's say for example, this is your municipal limit of Hyderabad, right? And this is your office. This is your which office? First office. And within 15 kilometers, office to municipal limits are 15 kilometers. Does it make any difference? No, it doesn't make any difference because 50 kilometers, do we have to start the 50 kilometers from here? No, we don't have to start the 50 kilometers from here. We have to start the 50 kilometers from here. Are you getting the point or not? We don't have to start the 50 kilometers from here. Try to understand. We have to start the 50 kilometers from here. Now, within 35 kilometers, another city is there. Say for example, city A. This is Hyderabad and this is city A. Now within the 35 kilometers, now tell me one thing, from the municipal limit, how many kilometers are over? From the municipal limit, so far 35 kilometers are over. Now another city also started. Now listen to this very carefully. 35 kilometers. Are we starting from here or we are starting from here? Sir, we are starting from here. Am I correct or not? Now 35 kilometers are over. What is the provision? Within 50 kilometers. Are you getting the point? Now 35 kilometers are there. Now listen to this very carefully. Suppose the another office is inside the city and here your second office is there. Here which office is there? Second office is there. And this is 21 kilometers inside that. Now look at that. 35 kilometers plus 21 kilometers comes to what? 56 kilometers. The answer is yes. The second office must be headed by a chartered accountant. This is a case number 1. This is a case number 1. Second office, now tell me one thing. Second office is 35 plus 21 kilometers. Second office is what? 35 plus 21 kilometers. Are you getting the point? First office is here. Now first office municipal limits are starting from here. 35 kilometers here plus 21 kilometers here. Total how many? 56 kilometers away. Your second office is 56 kilometers away. Yes, it is required to be headed. So what is your answer? In this case, yes, second office needs member of institute. Now let's understand the second question. Say for example, second question. Now suppose this is the municipal limit. This is again 35 kilometers. This is the municipal limit of Hyderabad. Now your second office is in the city B. Now after entering the city B, inside 11 kilometers are there. Inside how many kilometers are there? 11. Now 35 plus 11. So here 35 plus 11 kilometers comes to what? 46 kilometers. How many? 46 kilometers. So in the city B, no. In the second office, another member of institute is not required to head. Am I clear? So here it is required, here it is not required. Clear everyone? What is the reason? Here 35 plus 21 was coming to what? 35 plus 21 was coming to what? 56 kilometers. That's why it is required. But here 35 plus 11 coming to what? 46. Then it is not required. So like that, the complication of the question, the ICA may do it. So make sure that if your concepts are very clear, then let the any answer given by the ICA. So first of all, what is section number 27 says? Ki sir, if you have two branches or more than two branches of your office in India, you have to make sure that the second branch must be headed by the member of institute, and it is your also responsibility that provided further that on the regular basis you have to make sure that you are updating the institute with the second office details, with the second person name details, and also the changes on regular intervals. But under the following circumstances, you need not required to be head. The second office is not required to be head by the another member of institute. Case number 1, if your second office is in the same premises, if your second office is in the same city, or if your second office is located 50 kilometers within 50 kilometers of radius from the end of the municipal limit of the city in which your first office is located. Are you getting the point? Within 50 kilometers radius from the municipal limits of the city in which your first office is located, and the second office is within the 50 kilometers, then in the second office also the another member in practice or another member of institute is not required to be appointed to head that office. Clear everyone? Yes. Now this is the one provision. Now second provision is also one of the very important point. It comes in the examination as a very different kind of question. Now look at that. Temporary offices in case of firms having the principal place of business in hilly area. Now say for example, now let's take an example. This is the hilly area. Am I correct? I don't know my drawing is good or not. Suppose this is the hilly area. Now your first office at the top of the hill. Now in the hilly area, whether the snowfall will take place or not, yes, and due to the snowfall and due to the very extreme weather conditions, what will happen? Most of the times your office will be shut down, because the way of coming to your office will be blocked by the snow, will be blocked by the poor weather conditions. So in that case, ICA is saying that come to the plain areas. Come to the which areas? Plain areas. From the hilly areas, you can come to the plain area and you can open your second office. You can open your which office? Second office. But for the which purpose? Temporary purpose. For the which purpose, guys? Temporary purpose. Maximum 3 months period is allowed. How many months is allowed? 3 months are allowed. So from the hilly area, you can come to the plain area where weather conditions are good. For the betterment of the member of institute, ICAI is saying that we will allow you to operate your second office. We will allow you to operate your second office in the plain area temporarily for 3 months. Are you getting the point? That second office will not be treated as your second office. It is in substitution of your first office. Are you getting the point? It will not be treated as your branch. It is temporarily substituting. It is temporarily representing your that office which is there in hilly area. Are you getting the point or not? So in the plain area, you can come down from the hills, and during the snowfall, come to the plain area, establish your second office in the plain area for the maximum period of what? 3 months. And most importantly, at the time of opening that office or at the time of closing that office, you have to make sure that you have to intimate to the council. Point number one. Point number two, on your stationery items and on your letterhead and on your visiting cards, only the address of the main office which is there in the hilly area should be printed. Not the temporary office address is not allowed to be printed on your stationery and visiting cards. Condition number two. Condition number three, maximum time period allowed to open this particular second office is what? 3 months. Condition number three. Condition number four, after your this office, second office in the plain area, which is temporary office, which is closed, you have to remove the nameplate from this office. You are not allowed to hang your nameplate for more than 3 months. Once the 3 months are over and once your office is shut down in the plain area, you have to again remove the nameplate from there and take it back with you. If you are able to satisfy these 4 or 5 conditions which the ICAI is saying, then your second office will not be treated as your branch office. That is the exemption number 2. So temporary office in case of firm having a principal place of business in hilly area. If your principal place of business is in which area, everyone? If it is in hilly area, you can come down from the hilly area. From the hilly area, you can come down and you can open your another office in plain area, but for the maximum how many months? So 3 months. Point number one, institute to be informed at the time of opening, at the time of closing, maximum time period 3 months. Then on your correspondence, on your letterheads, visiting card, main office which is there in hilly area, that address must be printed. And most importantly, you are not allowed to hang the nameplate of your second office once your office is closed. So office is closed, take the nameplate and go to the hilly area. Are you getting the point? So these are the following conditions to be satisfied. What are the conditions? Maximum, you can see that conditions. What are the conditions? Maximum 3 months once in a year. Maximum 3 months once in a year. In a single year, maximum 3 months. Point number two, office can be shifted to nearby plain area. That is what I told you. From hilly area, you can come down to the plain area. Condition number three, during this tenure, old office can remain open for the correspondence boards can be affixed. Are you getting the point or not? You can keep your main office open. You can keep your main boards open, main office open for the corresponding letters and all those things. After the period of the new office expires, that is after 3 months, name board from the new office to be removed. That is what I told you. Plain area, you are allowed to be there in the plain area for maximum 3 months. After the 3 months are going to be over, take out the nameplate from that plain area and go back to your hilly area. You are not allowed to hang the nameplate in area for the remaining 9 months. No, not allowed. Only for 3 months till the time your office is going on. Right? And next point, intimation to the institute at the time of opening and closing of the institute. That is what the 4 or 5 conditions I told you. Maximum 3 months time period, and stationery should be printed with the main office address only, and you can keep your main office also open. Next point, um, you are allowed to come back to the plain area. Next point, maximum 3 months, and every time when you are opening it and closing it, you have to inform to whom? I say. And once your office is closed in the plain area, temporary office, then you have to take out the nameplate also from there, and you are not allowed to hang it after the closure of your office. So these are the various major question which is definitely have a chances of coming into your examination. That is why I put the star marks in the beginning only. So make sure that you are not leaving this particular topic at any cost. Then if you are leaving this particular topic, then you are doing it on your own risk. Clear, everyone? So that brings an end to what? That brings an end to the section number 27. Clear, everyone? Now so what are the two exemptions we understood? Section number 27 says that if your first office is there and if you have the second office is there, it is required to be headed by the member of the institute. But if the second office is in the same premises, in the same city, or within the 50 kilometers from the municipal limits of the city in which your first office is located, then in that case, second office is not required to be headed by the member of institute. Second thing, second exemption, if you are having a main office, your main office is in the hilly area. For the temporary period of 3 months, you can come down to the plain area, open your temporary office there, but before opening and after closing, you have to intimate to the ICA. Maximum time period allowed is 3 months, and you are allowed to hang the board till the 3 months only. After that, you have to shut down your office and you have to take out the board also. You are not allowed to hang it after the closure of your office. And on your stationery and visiting cards and every item, your main office address only should be there. Yes, you can keep your main office also open for the correspondence purposes. So with that, section number 27 is over, right? Now, next point. Next point. Now, what is the next point? Now, there is another section which we have to understand, section number 24. But before moving to the section number 24, I would like to throw some light on the particular provision which is given as per the ICA. So ICA says that the place which is advertised to be the branch, that is a place where the name board of the firm is affixed and the place mentioned in the professional stationery or the other documents or the branch eligible member in charge. Person being either member or a partner or a full-time employee or one who is actively in the charge of office. Presume that the person is in the charge of office either when he is the resident in the city of the office or visits such office for not less than 182 days in a year. Now, a person who is running the second office, who is heading the second office, has to satisfy either of these two conditions. It's a very simple thing. The person heading the branch office must satisfy either of two conditions. So what are the two conditions? Either of two conditions. Condition number one. Point number one, he is a resident of the city in which your second office is located. He is resident of the city in which your second office is located. And point number two, or he should visit such branch office for at least 182 days in a year. He should visit such branch office for at least 182 days in a year. Then only he'll be treated as a proper head who is heading your second office or branch. I hope everyone is crystal clear. Yes, sir. So now section number 27 is over. Section number 2 is over. Section number 4 is over. Section number 5 is over. Section number 6 is over. Section number 7 is over. Section number 8 is over. Section number 20 is over. Section number 27 is over. Now we are going to understand section number 24, which is very important section. And when we'll do the professional misconduct and other misconduct 34 clauses, then again there will be a moment, there will be a time coming when I will tell you to refer the section number 24 again. Are you getting the point? Now very highly important section. Now what does this section is all about? This section is all about saying this. Now what this section is saying: penalty for falsely claiming to be a member. What do you mean by this provision? First of all, to try to understand. What do you mean by penalty for falsely claiming to be a member? There can be so many possibilities. First of all, you are not a member, but you are telling to the outside world that you are a member. Condition number one. Condition number two, you are a member, but you are using the word called designation called chartered accountant, but you are not holding a certificate of practice. Are you getting the point or not? Are you understanding what I'm saying? So point number one is, you are not at all a member of institute. It means you are not at all a chartered accountant. But what are the two things you are doing? Either you are telling to the outside world that you are a member of the institute, or you are also using the designation called chartered accountant, by which the people are coming to you and giving you the work and you are making a fraud out of them. Am I correct or not? In that situation, what kind of penalty you are going to have? Second situation is, you are a member of the institute, but you are not a certificate of practice holder. You are not a practicing CA, but you are telling to the world that you are a practicing CA. Are you getting the point? In both the cases, punishment will be there. So let me create one chart for you so that you can understand what I'm trying to tell. Now say for example, point number one, there can be two situations. There can be how many situations? There can be two situations. So what are the two situations? So situation number one, you are not a member of institute. You are a member of institute. So why the member of institute will be punished? Now look at that particular chart first. After that you will realize. You are not a member of institute. You are representing the outside world that yes, you are a member. In that case, are you doing the fraud or not? You are not a member of institute, but to the outside world, you are telling that yes, I'm a chartered accountant. I'm the member of ICA. Or you are using chartered accountant designation. It means you are telling to the outside world that you are in practice also. Are you understanding the point? Point number one, you are not at all a member of institute. In that, you are telling to the outside world a wrong information, a false information, falsely claiming to be the member of the institute. You are telling to the outside world that first of all, though, you are a member of institute. Along with that, you are also saying that you are a chartered accountant. Sir, member means it may be in practice, may not be in practice. But when you are telling to the outside world that you are a chartered accountant, full designation, you are showing it to the outside world by printing the wrong visiting cards or by printing the false, letterheads. You are telling to the outside world that you are a chartered accountant. It means you are telling to the outside that you are in practice also. So are you falsely claiming to be a member or not? Yes, that is what is section number 24. And section number 24 is also saying one thing. Sir, you are a member of institute. At least relief is there. You are a member of institute. But you are not a COP holder. But representing that you are in practice. Representing that you are in practice. Clear everyone? So point number one, you are not a member of the institute. You are not a member of the institute. And you are telling that you are a member of the institute. Problem number one. Problem number two, you are using the chartered accountant designation also. That is a scenario number one. Scenario number two says that you are a member. Scenario number two says that you are a member. Okay, at least you are a member of ICA, but you are not a COP holder. You are using the word called chartered accountant below your name, and you are not at all holding a practicing certificate, but to the outside world, you are telling that you are a chartered accountant. In that case, ICA says that in both the cases, you shall be penalized. There will be a penalty on such person. Now, what is the penalty? Now, see, look at that. Not a member, not being a member of the institute. Point number one, you are not a member of the institute, but represents that he is a member of the institute or uses a designation as a chartered accountant. You are representing to the outside world that you are a member of the institute, and you are also telling to the outside world that you are a chartered accountant, but you are not at all a member of institute. बात यहीं पे खत्म. You are a zero fellow. You are not a chartered accountant, but outside you are saying that you are a chartered accountant, and you are also saying that you are a practicing chartered accountant. You are a member and you are a practicing chartered accountant. And second case, being a member of the institute. In the second case, you are a member of the institute, but not having a certificate of practice. You are not holding any COP, but you are telling to the outside world that yes, you are in practice and practicing as a chartered accountant. So in both the cases, both the people are doing the fraud with the outside public or not? Yes, sir, they are doing the fraud with the outside public. So if you are doing the fraud with the outside public, do you think that the public will allow you, or ICA will allow you to do this kind of false claim? No. So section number 24 says that let's punish these people. Now, first time punishment by the CA Act 1949 will be very small. But second time, if you are doing the same mistake here, so here means here we are going to learn about two types of punishment. First conviction, what will be the punishment? And if you are repeating the same mistake again and again, if you are repeating the same fraud again and again, then obviously second time onwards, your punishment will be more rigorous. So what is the first conviction? The first conviction says that, what is the first conviction says that there will be a fine which may extend to rupees 1000. You might be saying that, sir, itna sa fine. You never know. CA Act is in 1949, and you never know, in the Code of Ethics 2019 there are going to be huge fines. They're going to be the change in the fines because it was required to be done. That is the reason, but unfortunately, Code of Ethics 2019 is not at all applicable for your November 2020 examination. So, it is punishable on first conviction. What is the punishment? Fine may be extended, that to not off flat 1000 rupees, may extend to 1000 rupees, and it means on the first conviction you can only go away by paying a fine up to rupees 1000. But if you are doing second time, on the second fine with the imprisonment which may extend to 6 months, or with a fine which may extend to 5000, or with both. It means what they are saying, that if you are doing the first time fraud, so on the first conviction, on the which conviction, on the first conviction, so what is the penalty? This is the first conviction and this is the penalty. What is the penalty? On the first conviction, penalty is fine up to rupees 1000. But on the second conviction, if you are doing this mistake of fraud again, then fine will increase up to rupees 5000, or imprisonment up to 6 months, or what? Both. So you can see that on the subsequent event, there will be imprisonment which may extend up to how many months? It may extend up to 6 months, or with a fine which may extend up to 5000, or what? Both. So looking at the fines and all, you might be thinking, sir, these are very less amount of fines, but we can't do anything. This is what the fines given under section number 24, which is known as a fine for a penalty for a person who is falsely claiming to be a member. So point number 1, you are not at all a member. You are telling to the outside world that you are a member and using the designation of chartered accountant. In the second case, you are a member of institute, but you are not a COP holder, you are not a certificate of practice holder, and to the outside world you are saying that yes, you are a chartered accountant. Clear, everyone? So that brings an end to section number 24. Now after that we have to understand section number 24A. Now what is section number 24A? Penalty for using the name of the council. Very interesting section. Penalty for using the name of the council, awarding degree of chartered accountancy, etc. Section number 24A. If you are telling to the outside world that I have been awarded as a degree, or you are representing to the outside world that I have been awarded a chartered accountancy degree by the Council of India, and you are using the name of council in that particular document or in that particular assignment which you are doing, then in that case there is another penalty. Now see what they are saying, that they are saying that in such situation what will happen. Now look at that, what they are saying. Same as otherwise provided in this act, no person shall use the name of the common seal which is identical with the name or the common seal of the institute. You are not allowed to copy, or you are not allowed to use the name of the, you are not allowed to use the seal which is very much similar to the common seal of the ICAI, so nearly resembles its act to deceive, or as it likely to deceive the public. So that you are not allowed to use any kind of seal of ICAI, or suppose you went to the market, you made one, common seal in the name of Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, which is resembling the original common seal of ICAI, and you are trying to deceive the public. What do you mean by deceiving the public? Deceiving the public means what? Cheating. What do you mean by deceiving? Deceive means what? Cheating. You are cheating the public by using that common seal which is very much similar, which is very much resembling the ICAI. Or you are telling to the outside world, what you are telling to the outside world, award any degree, diploma, certificate, or any designation which indicates or purports to indicate the position or attainment of any qualification or complete similar to that of member of the institute, or seek to regulate in any manner whatsoever the profession of the chartered accountant. You are telling to the outside world that ICAI has given me the degree, or you are showing to the outside world any kind of your achievement which is equivalent to the chartered accountancy core. Are you trying to make a fool out of the public or not? Yes, I, even if I'm not a chartered accountant, but yes, I'm very much similar to the chartered accountant. This is what the degree which is very much equivalent to the chartered accountant. To the outside world you are trying to deceive it, to cheat it. Then any person contravening this provision, any person contravening this provision without prejudice to any proceeding which may be taken against him, with it punishable of an extent on first conviction to 1000 rupees, and on the subsequent conviction with the imprisonment which may extend to 6 months, or a fine may extend to 5000 or both. So it means fine under section 24A for falsely using the name of council, or falsely using the common seal of the council, or falsely telling to the public that yes, you are a degree holder which is awarded by the council, which is very much equivalent to the chartered accountancy. The fine under section, or you can say rather the penalty or fine under section 24A is very much equal to the penalty of section 24. So section 24 is what? Falsely claiming to be a member. Even if you are not a member or you are a member, you are telling to the outside world that you are a practicing chartered accountant. And section number 24A is what? Section number 24A says that you are telling to the outside world that yes, council has awarded me a degree. You are using the common seal, which is very similar to council. In all the both cases, your penalty will remain same. Sir, what is the penalty? On the first conviction, a fine up to ₹1,000, and on the second time, again a fine up to ₹5,000, or an imprisonment up to 6 months, or what? Both. So this is what do you mean by section number 24. So I hope there is no problem at section number 24, but yes, again I'm telling you, section number 27 is very important. Section number 24 is also very important. So many times this question has been asked. And section number 24, again, when we'll be doing the professional ethics, in the professional misconduct and other misconduct, I think when we'll be doing the part 3 of schedule 1 and clause 1, there will be in a position to understand this section again, section number 24. So there I will tell you to come back to the section number 24, and we will be proceeding one by one. Now are you getting the point? Now, companies not to engage in accountancy, section number, what is the section number? Section number is 25. Companies not to engage in accountancy. So listen to this very carefully. What do you mean by companies not to engage in accountancy? Do you all remember section number 143 subsection 1 and 143 subsection, sorry, section number 141 subsection 1 and section number 141 subsection 2, which is known as qualifications of an auditor? Now let's rewind our thing. So section number 141 subsection 1 and section number 141 subsection 2 talks about what? They talks about qualification of an auditor. And if I'm not wrong, I already told you there at that point of time, you can practice in the form of sole proprietor or a partnership firm or an LLP. In India, are you allowed to practice in the form of company? That is not there, because section number 143, sorry, section number 141 subsection 3, the very first disqualification, says that you are disqualified to operate in the form of company or a body corporate except LLP. It is specially written over there. If you do not remember that, go back to your company audit lectures and refer the section number 141 subsection 3. The very first disqualification says that you are not allowed to practice in India in the form of company or a body corporate. That is what section number 25 of the CA Act 1949 is telling you. So let us understand what the CA Act 1949 is telling us. So CA Act 1949 says that no company, no company whether incorporated in India or elsewhere shall practice as chartered accountants. It means in India or outside India, practicing company is not allowed. Practicing sole proprietorship is allowed, practicing partnership firm is allowed, practicing LLP is allowed, but practicing company is not allowed. That we have already understood the Companies Act, and again we are understanding the same thing under section 25 of what? CA Act 1949. If any company contravenes the provision of subsection 1, so section number 25 subsection 1 says that no company is allowed to be incorporated in India or outside India to practice in the form of chartered accountants. But if you are practicing chartered accountancy in the form of company in India, it means you are violating the subsection 1. Then in that case, without prejudice, what is your punishment? Every director, every manager, every secretary and other officer thereof who is knowingly a party to such contravention shall be punishable with a fine which may extend to first conviction to 1,000 and on subsequent conviction to 5,000. Very small penalty. They are saying that, first of all, subsection 1, they are saying that no company either in India incorporated or outside India, no company either in India or outside India can practice in the form of chartered accountant. That is what is written in subsection 1 of 25. Now, subsection 2 says that penalty. In case of first conviction, if you are still practicing in India or outside India in the form of company as a chartered accountant, first conviction, what is your penalty? Up to rupees 1,000. And second conviction, your penalty is up to rupees 2,000, up to rupees 5,000. There's not even an imprisonment. So remember one thing, penalty is same as section number 24 and 24A, but there you have a imprisonment or imprisonment up to 6 months or both also point, but there you don't have the imprisonment because we can't imprison the company. Company is an artificial person. That's the reason imprisonment penalty is not there, right? Now, company is not to engage in accountancy, that we already understood. Therefore, what extra they are saying, now listen to this, what extra they are saying. On thoroughly studying the provisions of the both the acts, what do you mean by both the acts? Companies Act and CA Act 1949. The LLPs, those allowed to be appointed as an auditor in accordance with the Companies Act 2013. However, it cannot be engaged into the practice if it has a company as its partner as per the Chartered Accountants Act 1949. Therefore, in short, LLP not having any company as its partners can be engaged into practice and thus take the audit assignment. A very important point, and I don't know whether you remember or not, this we have already done again in Companies Act. I already told you what is the first qualification of auditor. Only individuals. Suppose there is a LLP of practicing CAs. Remember, only individual can be the partner. Then only you are allowed to be practicing in India. That is already given in Companies Act 2013. Again, it is being again told if there is an LLP. So what this provision is saying, let me write it here. If you are a LLP of practicing firm, if you are a LLP of practicing firm, and among your partners there is one company, among your partners there is one company, then in that case you are disqualified, because we already know under the Companies Act section number 141 subsection 2 that if you are operating or practicing in India as a LLP firm, then in that case you have to make sure that only and only individuals are allowed to be your partners. If the company is a partner in the LLP form of practicing chartered accountants, you are prohibited to practice in India. You are disqualified. Are you getting the point? That is what is written in section number 25. So section number 25 above says that no company in India or outside India incorporated can be practicing in the form of chartered accountants. If you are doing, subsection 2 says that then there is a penalty if you are violating the subsection 1. What is a penalty? First conviction pay up to 1,000 rupees, second conviction pay up to 5,000. And below that they are saying that even though LLPs are allowed to get practice in India in the form of chartered accountants, but in the LLP among their partners, if one company is a partner, then that LLP is also disqualified to be a practicing firm. That is what the Chartered Accountancy Act as well as the Companies Act 2013 both are saying the same things only. Clear? So section number 25 is over. Yes. So what is the next section we have to understand, everyone? The next section what we have to understand is known as section number 26, unqualified persons not to sign the documents. Now, clause number 1 of part 1 of schedule 1, which we are going to do in the future. Clause number 1, remember here, of part 1 of schedule 1 is also going to talk about this only. Basically, what is the idea behind section number 26? Let me give you the clear idea about the section number 26. Section number 26 says that let's prevent the unqualified people to sign the documents in the name of chartered accountants. Let's save the society. Let's save the society from the unauthorized people. Sir, what do you mean by unauthorized people? Say for example, you are not a qualified member of, see, even if at least if you are a member of ICAI, you will be treated as qualified person. But other than member of ICAI, you will be treated as unqualified. It means basically unqualified people should be prevented from signing any kind of document. That is what the purpose behind section number what? 26. So what is the section number 26 is saying? Ki let's not allow the unqualified people to sign the documents. That is what the basic provision. And the same thing has been talked in the clause number 1 of part 1 of schedule 1 of CA Act 1949. And when we'll start the professional misconduct, we'll start with the schedule 1 part 1 clause 1. There also I'll repeat you to come to the section number 26. So what is the part 1 clause 1 of schedule 1 of CA Act 1949? Allowing anybody to practice in your name. If the member in practice allows anybody to practice in your name, then in that case you are what? Disqualified. Are you getting the point or not? You are not allowed to allow, you are not allowed to allow, you are prohibited to allow any unqualified person to practice in your name. If you are allowing any unqualified person to practice in your name or sign the documents in your name, then section number 26 also saying that you are going to be penalized. Now see, no person, what is written? Try to understand what they are saying. No person other than the member of institute, means other than the member of institute, no other person other than the member of institute shall sign any document on the behalf of a chartered accountant in practice or a firm of chartered accountants in his or its professional capacity. Say for example, I allowed my employee, I see, signing the document is different thing, practicing is different thing. Are you getting the point or not? Practice means what? Obviously I will allow my article assistants also to practice in my behalf. Are you getting the point? I will allow my audit staff also to practice in my team only. So even though they are unqualified, but are they the part of CA profession or not? Article assistants, the persons who are undergoing the training under me, I'm their principal employer, they are my article assistants. Are they the part of CA profession or not? And I'm telling them to go to the client's place and practice on my behalf. That is fine. That is unqualified people are practicing, but they are belonging to the CA profession. That is allowed. Here they are saying that nobody else should sign the, here not the practice word is used. Here the word signing the document is used. Are you getting the point? There in the clause 1, especially the focus is allowing anybody, allowing unqualified people to practice in your name, then you are guilty under clause number 1 of part 1 of schedule 1 of CA Act 1949. But here they are saying that unqualified people should not be allowed to sign the document. So if you are a member of institute, you are allowed. So what is the chart saying? Signing. What is the chart saying? Signing of documents. Member of institute? Yes. Not a member? Prohibited. Clear everyone? On behalf of whom? On behalf of a CA firm or a practicing CA. Are you getting the point? So an unqualified person other than the member of the institute is not allowed to sign any kind of documents on the behalf of chartered accountant in practice or a firm of chartered accountants in practice. The person, that is what subsection 1 of section number 26 says. But what is the section number 2 of the section, what is the subsection number 2 of the section number 26 says? It says that if somebody contravenes the provision, then here little bit penalty is very high. Without prejudice to any other provision, he may be taken, action may be taken against him, which is punishable on first conviction of fine not less than 5,000, but which may extend to rupees 5 lakhs, and in the event of second conviction, then imprisoned for a term which may be extended up to 1 year, or with a fine not less than 10,000 and which may extend to 2,000. So let me give you the idea. What is a fine or what is a penalty in case of section number 26? Here you will come to know that yes, little bit penalty is good. So if you are doing the first time, if you are signing the document on the behalf of the firm and you have done this mistake, you allowed any unqualified person to sign on your name, then you will be punished. Who will be punished? That particular chartered accountant in practice, and that particular firm of chartered accountant in practice will be punished with the word fine of minimum 5,000, maximum 1 lakh. On the second time, there will be a fine of minimum to the double of that, 10,000, maximum 2 lakhs, or imprisonment. What was our imprisonment earlier? Up to 6 months, but here is imprisonment up to 1 year, or what? Or both. So that brings an end to your another section called section number 26. So let's revise the penalties we have done. Section number 24 talking about falsely claiming to be a member. Section number 24A talking about telling to the outside world by deceiving with the common seal, which is very much similar to the ICA, or deceiving them saying that I am the degree holder, which is equivalent to chartered accountancy, which is provided by the ICA. And section number 25, company is practicing in the form of practicing chartered accountants. You formed a company and you are practicing as a chartered accountant in the name of company either in India or outside India. And section number 26 says that you are allowing any unqualified person to sign the documents on your behalf. Section number 24, what is the penalty? First conviction, fine up to rupees 1,000. Second conviction, fine up to rupees 5,000, or imprisonment up to 6 months or both. 24A says same, which is same as section number 24. 25 says that first conviction, fine up to rupees 1,000, and second conviction, fine up to rupees 5,000. No imprisonment, because that is a company and company is an artificial person. And section number 26 may the fine is minimum 5,000, maximum 1 lakh, no imprisonment. But on the second conviction, the fine will become double. What is the double? The minimum 10,000, maximum 2 lakhs, or imprisonment up to 1 year, or both. So this is what the summary given to you below that, right or not? Now section number 28, what it talks about. So 27, why 27 has not come? 27, maintenance of branch office, we have already done now. 24, 25, 26, 27, maintenance of branch office, and 28 is what? Section 2, sanction to prosecute. No person shall be prosecuted under this act except on a complaint made by or under the order of council or the central government. So they are saying that no member, no person will be prosecuted until and unless the complaint is made by council or the complaint is made by central government against that person. Clear, everyone? So that brings an end to your section number 28 as well, right? So let us proceed with the next topic, which is known as KYC norms for CA in practice. And remember one thing, this topic is a little bit recommendatory. What do you mean by KYC norms for CA in practice? So if you are a CA in practice, are you serving so many clients or not? So when you're serving so many clients, you have to make sure that there is one register you have to maintain in your office. In that register, you have to write the each and every information relating to your client. That is why it is known as KYC. KYC full form kya hai? Know your client. Basically, KYC word has come from the banking sector, where it means that know your customer. But here in Chartered Accountancy Act 1949 also, they are saying that whatever the customers, whatever the clients you are serving, it is your responsibility as a CA in practice that in your office there should be one register. In that register, each and every information about your client should be there. KYC, know your client. So that when the peer review, you will do one chapter called peer review. When the peer review will take place on your practicing unit, or it will take place on your firm, at that point of time you have to show them this register. That is the reason KYC register you have to maintain your firm. So let us understand what do you mean by KYC, right? So let us understand what are the KYC norms for the CA in practice, which are recommendatory again. So see, what do you mean by KYC, guys? Know your client. As I already told you, being a member in practice, it is your responsibility to ensure that you are maintaining one register where you are maintaining the information relating to your client to whom you have served, either it is statutory audit or it is tax audit or any kind of audit. That is what you mean by KYC for the norms for the CA in practice. So again, telling you it is just a recommendatory thing. So let us understand what the KYC document or what are the KYC provisions we have to learn here. The financial services industry globally is required to obtain the information of their clients and comply with know your client norms, keeping in mind that the highest standards of the chartered accountancy profession in India. Council, that is ICAI, has recommended norms to be observed by the members of profession who are in practice. So again telling you, this is not for members in service, it is only for members in practice. So it is not applicable for the members in service. So if you are a practicing CA, then only KYC norms provisions are applicable to you. If you are not in practice, then the KYC norms are not applicable to you. Clear everyone? Yes, sir. So these norms, what they are saying, these norms, these know your client norms are also important in order to ensure a healthy growth of profession and an equitable flow of professional work among the members. The following norms have been approved by the Council of the ICA regarding the KYC information. So what kind of KYC information you should have about your client? So let us understand one by one. Entities information, it means your client's information. What is the first information? General information. In the general information, which information? Name of your client, type of the entity, business description. What is the name of the client? What is the type of the entity? Is it a society, or is it a trust, or is it a company, or is it a partnership firm, or is it a sole proprietor? And what is the business description? What kind of business your client is into? Corporate structure. So it is a general information, then it is a corporate structure. In the corporate structure, what kind of information you have to write? Name of the ultimate parent company. So if your client is having any holding company, or it is having any parent company, name of the parent company also you should record in your register. Name of the parent company, or name of the affiliates, the other subsidiaries, the other joint ventures of the common parent, all those information relating to your client you should have. What is the regulatory information? Your company's PAN number, your client's company's PAN number, your client's company's company identification number, your client's director's identification number, DIN number, directors' addresses and names and addresses of the companies in which above person is a director. Are you getting the point? So again repeating, what is the general information? The name of the entity, the nature of the entity, and the business in which your entity client is operating. Are you getting the point? Second one, what are the corporate structure relating information? The name of your immediate parent, name of your ultimate parent, name of your parent company, and name of the affiliates, that is subsidiaries and joint ventures. Then what is a regulatory requirement? The company's PAN number should be there. Company's identification number also you should record in the KYC register. You should record the director's identification number and director's name and address also, and the companies in which such director is a director. Are you getting the point? So these are the various things you have to record over here. Engagement information, what kind of engagement for which you have been hired by such company? Are you working there as an internal auditor, or you're working there as a statutory auditor, or only for management consultancy and other services? For what kind of assignment, what kind of engagement they have hired you? That kind of information again you have to apply in the KYC register. So in the KYC register, four types of information: general information, corporate structure information, regulatory information, and nature of engagement. Point number one, name of the entity, nature of the work of nature of the business of the entity, and the nature of the entity. Then corporate structure may name of the ultimate parent, name of the parent company, then other affiliates which you have in the group. Then in the regulatory information, the company's PAN number, company's SIN number, your the client's director's DIN number, director's name and addresses, and the companies in which they are the director, and the nature of engagement for which you have been hired by such particular entity. Right now, this is what the information, KYC information of the entity which you have to write. Other than that, three more informations you have to collect about your work. What are the other informations? Entities financial information. What is the next one? Entities financial information means what? Their financial statements and other financial information relating documents. Name of the ultimate parent auditor. If you are a subsidiary auditor, if you are an auditor of one of the components of the group, then who is the auditor of your client's parent company? Suppose I am the auditor of one subsidiary. My subsidiary is having one parent or not? Who is the auditor of that parent company? That is also we have to write over here. And any violation of any law or regulation, if my client has done, that kind of records you have to maintain. So that brings an end to the recording of which information? KYC information, but that is not mandatory. That is recommendatory for the members in practice in India. So point number one, general information. Point number two, the corporate structure information. Point number three, the regulatory information. Point number four, the nature of engagement and other information. So basically, what is your KYC knowledge? What is your KYC? So let's write what are the KYC provisions. So let's not focus or spend so much of time on this because that is a recommendatory provision. So KYC mein first one is entity information. In that, name of the entity, nature of the entity, business of the entity. Second one, corporate structure. Name of ultimate parent company, name of parent company, and information on affiliates. Third, regulatory information. Company's PAN, company's SIN, corporate identification number, director's DIN, director's name and address, companies in which, other companies in which such a director is a director, nature of engagement, what kind of work you have been hired for, right? Point number 5, other information mein entities financial information and name of parents auditor, and what is the last one? The last one, any kind of violation of laws and regulations. That what brings an end to the KYC related issues which you have to understand in the professional ethics, right? Now the next one we have to understand, what do you mean by professional ethics, what do you not mean by professional ethics, section number 22. But we are not going to start with this topic, so we are going to leave these topics because professional ethics major core we are going to do once our residual provisions are over. So I have divided the professional ethics chapter into two parts. Now, first of all, we have understood all the sections. Section number 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, then 20, then 24, 23, 24, 25, 26. Are you getting the point? 27. And now, just now we have understood the KYC. So we are not going to do these, clauses and all. This is a major core part. For that, we'll have a later on. So you can see that the second schedule is there. The first schedule also we are leaving here. So we are not going to start with the professional ethics and other misconducts. We are going to start with the things which are other than this, so that at the last we can concentrate very calmly on all the 34 clauses which you have to learn. But before understanding the 34 clauses, I thought that let's complete the first part only, residual parts. Other than clauses parts, we are going to cover in the first 2-3 videos. And for the dedicated clauses, we are going to have 2-3 videos. So that is how we are going to divide the professional ethics into. So you can see that so far clauses are only going on. Now the most important thing is we have to understand the disciplinary flow, that is called section number 21 and section number 22. Now, sir, what do you mean by disciplinary flow, right?